Thanks, James, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to have a seat, Tom.
Thank you.
Ahlan wa sahlan. Great pleasure to be back in the kingdom and to have a chance to be on the Griff stage, which I have to say, Jen has never actually invited me up onto this stage previously. I'm not quite sure why, but I finally made it to the big stage. Tom, welcome.
Thank you very much.
To Saudi Arabia. Thanks for coming and joining us. I think most of you know Tom, but I thought, you know, for those that don't, we'd start literally at the beginning. And Tom, you say that your mother was actually instrumental in getting you into the kitchen. You were cooking alongside her at 8 years old with your brother, his twin brother. Why? Is that something she made you do? Is it something you voluntarily did? What was the...
Well, I wouldn't say voluntarily, no. But no, I mean, I've been cooking for a number of years now. But it all started. I'm Norfolk born and bred, so in the countryside. My mother was a very keen gardener, grew everything. So at an early age, I understood seasonal produce. So she'd grow vegetables spring, summer, autumn, winter. So, you know, very lucky to have that. My father was in the wine business, so he imported, exported wine, had a wine shop. So we traveled quite a lot as kids through France, eating in some rather nice places as well. So yeah, so by the age of 11, I knew I wanted to be a chef. So I was very fortunate, because we know how kids these days, they can't decide what they want to be, where they're going to work, or anything else really these days. So the age of 11, I actually rang up the local college where I grew up in Norwich, saying I wanted to become a chef. And this was then, you know, 81. Not a lot of people were going into cooking then. And basically I said, look, I want to be a chef. What do I need to do? Just come for an entrance exams. Don't have any exams, qualifications, and if we like you, we'll take you. And that was that. So I literally went to college at 16, studied for 2 years, came to London, worked in quite a few different Michelin restaurants.
Well, we're going to get to that in a minute, but just let me rewind that a bit, because I just want to pick up a couple of things there. So you grew up with a vegetable garden, and so understood produce from a very early age, which I have to say I didn't grow up with a vegetable garden, but we do share some common characteristics with my father cooking, you know, and I remember that very clearly. But I know that there was an incident, if you like, where you were in the south of France, and all of us would have loved to have spent a childhood in the south of France, I must say, with a father who was in the wine industry and a mother who was obviously a very good chef, and your dad booked a restaurant, and you got to the restaurant, and apparently it was only when you arrived that you discovered it was a Michelin restaurant. And you say in your biography that experience was quite formative. Formative for your father as well, apparently, in terms of the bill.
Totally.
But formative for you in terms of what you wanted to do.
I would say it was one of those, you know, defining moments. And all I remember is that my mother and father sort of, as I would say, tucking into garden creatures like snails and frogs' legs. But it really opened my eyes to how creative you can be with food. I was still, I would say, fairly fussy as a child, but in the essence of really great produce and how respected it was and how it was supposed to taste was just mind-blowing. And I looked at this food and I just thought, wow, you know, not only does it taste amazing, but this was the era of, we're just coming out of Nouvelle cuisine. So everything was very pretty, very precise, very small, but it was just the way that the flavors all worked together. As I said, I had very simple taste, and it was a beautiful tomato salad, but it was amazing produce. Little baby veal fillet with perfectly cooked little homemade chips and a very simple peach melba, but mind-blowing.
So I don't know how many of you can remember a meal that you had with that level of detail when you were 11 years old, but you know that just goes to show how transformative cuisine can be. And Tom, going back to the hotel school and catering college in Norwich, so you and your brother both went simultaneously and decided both to go into college, right, at the same time, and decided to be chefs?
Pretty much at the same time. Yeah, we were kind of supported each other, I guess. You know, we were both fairly disruptive students at school, but then we excelled in catering college, which is, you know, as I said, we found our thing, our life, our goal of what we wanted to do. We were both very aspirational in what we wanted to do, both very hungry, both hardworking kids. I guess that came from my father and grandfather, both very, you know, hardworking, driven guys in their own field. And on leaving college, going to the big world of, you know, of restaurants, and again, very, very different landscape as to where we are now. It wasn't easy to get a job, and so for me to get onto that path of what I want to do is to, you know, to work in the fine dining sector was incredibly difficult. There were a number of, you know, 3, 4, 5 restaurants where you would want to go and work.
So this is, I mean, just to put this in context, I mean, we're talking about the early 80s, I guess, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, and this was an era in London when French chefs dominated the scene. Fine dining was, you know, dominated by French chefs and restaurants, and that was the only place anyone wanted to work if you wanted to get on in life. And I remember it, I arrived in London in 85, and it was very similar. I was also told, you know, you've got to write to 50 people and hope that, you know, one of them's going to reply, and you actually had to write letters. You know, that was actually the way you did things. And apparently your letter included, I'll work for free. Is that true?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, so basically, as you said, Nick, I wrote off to around 15, 20 different hotels and restaurants. Probably about 10% came back to me and said, we'd love to take you, but you don't have enough experience, so come back to us when you're having experience.
So those of you who are not good in maths, so you wrote to 15 or 20 hotels and restaurants, 10% responded, so that's 1 to 2 replies out of 20, and you got...
And my sort of theory is this: okay, so you want me to get experience, but how can I get experience when you won't even, you know, open the door for me? So then the brainwave came, and I discussed this with my father, and he looked at me like, really? You want to go and work for nothing for 6 months? I said, well, I think it's the only way that I'm going to get my foot in the door. So again, I wrote off again to all these hotels, restaurants, and again, same amount of people wrote back. I had a lovely letter from one of the Roux brothers who sort of laughed and said, look, I love your letter, love your enthusiasm, but again, we have a wait list of chefs that want to come and work for us, but we can't just, you know, push you to the front of the queue. So one chef, one restaurant that came back to me, David Cavalier in Battersea, who had a 1-star, he said, thanks for the letter. Yeah, the door is there, come in and work.
And he, I think famously, you found yourself working so hard that at one point you actually quit, and he came back and said, no, you're going to be successful, come back. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, the first 6 months were kind of, I guess I was sort of treated with a little bit, you know, mitts and gloves, as they say, and I wasn't working the sort of, you know, full hours that everyone else was, because in a way, okay, I was working free. And then he offered me the place, and then it suddenly sort of changed a little bit. You know, I was then doing sort of, you know, 18 hours a day as opposed to 15. So it was tougher. But anyway, we had this sort of, you know, father to son chat, and he said, look, I kind of see something in you. I see your enthusiasm. I see your hard work ethic. And he said, look, you're going to have to take a little bit of crap now and again, but I think with your drive and your determination, I see someone that will go far.
And was that the sort of, you went on to Le Temps Clair after that? Was that with Pierre?
It was, yeah, it was another sort of key moment in my career that I said really spurred me on. He then helped me to get to Pierre Kaufmann. He opened the door there. So I went there, I went and worked there. It went from a 2-star to a 3-star, definitely not on my graft, but it did. So again, that really sort of helped me get to the next level as well. And from there, I worked in some other 1- and 2-star restaurants in London. One of the other chefs that I worked for was Richard Neat, Pied-à-terre.
Pied-à-terre, yeah.
He was definitely a bit of an enfant terrible in the day. But he was, again, you know, he opened another door for me, and he allowed me to to put me forward for the position of working with Joël Robuchon in Paris.
Who, of course, you joined just after he'd been awarded the Chef of the Century by Gourmet, right? So 89.
Yeah, so I then went and worked there in 93, and when I look back at, you know, kind of all the chefs that you would want to work for in the world, he was the one, like the god of French chefs.
And famously, no talking in his kitchen, right?
No talking at all. I mean, it's one of these things that you know, as a chef, you learn not only about the food, the style of food, the creativity of the chef that's running that restaurant, but also in the way that they run their kitchen, that they work their kitchen, that they talk to their chefs, the communication. And funnily enough, you know, he was a chef that just liked, in service, silence. So in a way, it taught you as well to really listen to what was being discussed, what was being talked, and the checks coming in and everything. Because not only did you have to listen to what he was saying, you had to obviously make sure that you were concentrating on cooking as well at the same time.
So I understand, from what I understand, Joël was one of these guys who precision was everything, and if you made an error, you were out, right? You were out of service.
You were gone. You were gone. So there was no second chances, no. And the guy that I was working with, I was taking over from him. I was running the meats. I was a chef de partie on the meat. I was only, 23, 24 then. And the guy had been there a year and a half, and he literally had another couple of weeks to go. He forgot to cook something. I wasn't 100% in charge then, so I'm afraid to say he got the bullet on that one, and he forgot to cook a guinea fowl, which took, as you know, probably like 30 minutes to cook. And Joël said, "There's the door. Put yourself through it."
Wow.
And then I was then in the firing line next.
So
pressure.
What point did you feel you wanted to run your own show? Was it something that you always felt that you would do, or was it something that you felt, as you grew in confidence, I could do it?
Well, the funny thing was that with me and my twin brother, because as we're twins, we're very, very close. When we actually started at college, or just before that, we had to go for an interview, and apparently the teacher that I had the interview, not that I really remember it, he came up to me sort of 3 months into the course and pulled me aside and said, "I don't know if you remember me, but you know," sort of wagging his finger, he said, "I'm watching you." And I said, "Okay, what's that?" He said, "Well, you know, the only reason that you're here now is because you're a twin." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you didn't really have a good interview, and we weren't going to take you. And the only reason really did was, you know, because you're a twin." And I thought, wow, that's a really nice talk and everything. So
motivational.
Yeah. And so I turned around as a sort of cheeky 16-year-old, and I said, "Well, in 10 years' time, you're going to know who I am, and I'm going to be famous. So there you go." And I sort of set that target on myself of giving myself 10 years. And that, again, was a bit of a motivation for me. So I kind of, over the next 10 years, really planned who I wanted to go and work with, how I was going to get it, and hopefully, with a bit of luck on the way, that, you know, I'll make something by the time I got to 26.
Yeah, it's like that interview with Chris Martin at Coldplay where he says, in 10 years' time, I'm going to be famous, and 4 years later, literally, he was on stage at Glastonbury, right? So you've got to have that belief.
Yeah, well, it's the belief, but also, you know, you have to have a bit of, I guess, lay luck. But as we all know, you make your own luck at the end of the day. And I think just through my sheer perseverance and determination and hard work ethic, you know, kind of a lot of things slotted into place.
And taking over I guess at Pied-à-Terre was the real test of making it, right?
Yeah, and that opportunity only came because obviously working with Richard at Pied-à-Terre, and then when he left, the manager there called me up out of the blue, literally, as I was working in another 3-star in Reims, in Champagne. Called me up literally and said, you know, "Do you want to come and take the baton? Richard is leaving, and there's a position here of head chef." I was then literally only 25 at that time, still very young, but I thought it's an opportunity that I'm not going to be given. So I thought, I will take it, please, thank you.
Amazing. Now, there's a point in around 2000, 2001 where you go and work for Carol Bamford at Dalesford, which of course now everyone knows about, but I guess at the time was still relatively pioneering with sort of local produce, sustainable, you know, very focused on doing things the right way, which we've heard a lot about here this morning, and this is going to be a critical thing for the kingdom as well. What can you say about those few years there?
No, I mean, the fact that I did that was because, you know, when I started at Restaurateur, as I said, I was 25, 26. I got 2 stars at 26. It was a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. I stayed there for 5 years, and I wouldn't say on the verge of burning out, but I just thought I just needed a bit of a break. And at that point, I remember, you know, about, as you said, produce, sustainability, where it comes from. And all I would do was call up a supplier and say, you know, the butcher in London, say, can I have a kilo of this? Whatever, fish supplier, the same. And there wasn't this sort of, you know, key message of, you know, transparency between where the produce come from, you know, to the end user of being a chef. And out of the blue, you know, I went and worked for Carol Bamford, and it was the start of, as you said, of Dalesford, and I helped that set up, and she was so passionate about her produce and working on an organic farm, and I got to work with the farmers. I helped her to open up that farm shop, and it was only then that I truly sort of got the whole picture about produce, where it was grown, how was it produced, and the whole story of understanding that there are other people who are as passionate as chefs, was the people that were making the produce for us, the chefs. But there wasn't this link, there wasn't this story, and I thought, wow, you know, we're really missing this link between the producers, the growers, and the chefs. And that's when I thought about this whole story, about how we can translate that, how we can communicate that to our customers. And wouldn't that just be amazing, that transparency of where the goods come from, and tell that story of the passion of the producers to our customers as well.
So Tom, one of the things that you said earlier was quite striking, which was when you got a letter back from either Michel or Albert saying, look, we've got a long list of people, you know, that want jobs here and that we'd need to give a job. Today, talent obviously is a big debating point. I doubt anyone can tell, I'm sure you've got no long lists of people that you can go through. Here's the 20 people that I might want to employ that, you know, are in a long line. What do you think is the most fundamental shift with regard to the way people look at this in terms of a career?
It's yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, hospitality has changed hugely over the 35 almost years that I've been in it, but nurturing new talent and seeing talent grow is an important part of me passing that baton on again. And you know, I would say over the career of me being, you know, a head chef from Restaurateur up until now, I've seen definitely many chefs come and go, and out of the ones that I know have got that magic, it's very few and far between that actually make it to the top of the tree, as we know. But the ones that I do identify and have identified, for me to help them to grow, to establish themselves as their own chef, is something that I want to do, and I feel that I can help them and get them onto that next level, whether that's, you know, sending them to another restaurant, another chef in the UK or outside the UK, in the US, or to René Redzepi or anywhere. It's just a natural feeling that I should do to these chefs, because it is so hard, I think, now for, you know, for chefs to even understand if they are a talent themselves, because a lot of them don't have that confidence or that belief in them. And then also in terms of the working environment, again, of how that has dramatically changed is for the better. No one is working, you know, 70, 80, 90 hours anymore, that's for sure, which is a great thing. But where we are today and coming out of COVID, lockdown, also Brexit for us has had a massive impact on the landscape of hospitality. and restaurants and chefs. And earlier, as I heard, you know, how do we protect chefs in this industry? How do we promote them? How do we keep them in the industry when it's, you know, it's very tough?
Yeah. Well, helpfully we've got inspirations to look at, and unfortunately we've run out of time because we could spend another half hour with Tom, but he's going to be here for the day. And Tom, thank you very much for joining us, and
pleasure.
Welcome to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This is where it's all happening.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.